Hello, this is Vincent McDaniel, and you are listening to How to Read People Like a Book, the Body Language Audiobook, provided to you by United Audiobooks. I hope you enjoy my audiobook. Now, let us begin.
Introduction. The most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said. Peter F. Drucker. Have you ever left a conversation feeling that something was left unsaid? Or perhaps you've wondered why a negotiation fell flat despite your perfect preparation? The truth is, we navigate a world where only a fraction of human communication happens through words. The rest, the rich tapestry of gestures, micro-expressions, postures, and unconscious behaviors often contains the most crucial information. The invisible conversation. The idea for this audiobook emerged from years of watching brilliant minds falter in human interactions despite their technical expertise. I've witnessed executives with impeccable credentials misread rooms, salespeople wonder why their pitch fell flat, and partners puzzle over unexpressed needs. These scenarios play out daily across conference tables and dinner tables alike, creating a silent epidemic of misunderstanding. Consider Michael, a talented software developer who was repeatedly passed over for team leadership. His technical skills were unmatched, but in meetings, he missed subtle signs of disengagement from colleagues and executives. Or Sarah, a therapist whose patients would nod along during sessions but rarely break through, until she learned to detect the microsecond facial expressions that revealed their true emotional states. The human face makes over 10,000 expressions. Our bodies leak information constantly. Yet most of us receive no formal training in how to read this universal language that transcends words, culture, and often conscious awareness. This knowledge gap doesn't just limit our professional potential, it constrains our human connections. Beyond surface reading. What sets this approach apart is its foundation in behavioral science rather than pop psychology shortcuts. You won't find simplistic claims like crossed arms always means defensiveness. Instead, you'll discover contextual interpretation frameworks based on clusters of behavior and the critical importance of establishing accurate baselines. This audiobook delivers a practical system for reading others with both accuracy and empathy. You'll learn to detect incongruence between words and body language, recognize emotional states through facial microexpressions, and understand how proxemics, the human use of space, reveals relationships and intentions. Most importantly, you'll develop these skills while maintaining ethical awareness. The goal isn't manipulation, but authentic connection. True power comes not from exploiting vulnerabilities, but from fostering genuine understanding. The path forward. I'm deeply indebted to the pioneering researchers whose work forms the scientific bedrock of this audiobook. Paul Ekman's groundbreaking studies on universal facial expressions, Ray Birdwestell's foundational work in kinesics, and Edward Hall's revelations about cultural differences in spatial relationships. This work also wouldn't exist without the thousands of professionals I've trained who shared their real-world challenges and breakthroughs. Their stories appear throughout these chapters, with identities protected, to illuminate key concepts and demonstrate practical applications. By investing time in this audiobook, you're embarking on a journey that will transform how you experience every human interaction. Whether you're seeking to enhance leadership presence, deepen personal relationships, or simply navigate social situations with greater confidence, the skills within these chapters will serve you for a lifetime. No special talent is required, just curiosity and practice. The human ability to read others is hardwired into our neural architecture. We merely need to consciously develop what evolution has already prepared us to do. I invite you to keep listening and begin developing your capacity to truly see others. In doing so, you may discover that the most profound connections begins with observation, continues with understanding, and culminates in the authentic presence that others instinctively trust. The journey of reading others always begins with a single look, one that goes beyond the surface to the truth beneath. See beyond words, connect beyond fear. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling that something unspoken lingered between the lines? Maybe the words sounded right, yet something in their eyes, posture, or tone whispered a different truth. I know that feeling well. Learning to read people isn't about judgment or control. It's about awakening to the subtle language every human being speaks, but few truly understand. When you begin to see the world through this lens, communication transforms. You start to notice what others really feel, even when they can't find the words. You recognize authenticity, sincerity, and even the quiet signals of emotional distance. This awareness becomes a kind of superpower, grounded not in manipulation, but in empathy and clarity. In partnership with Books for Growth, I'm sharing a free tool called What is Your Psychological Archetype? A transformative quiz that reveals the hidden patterns shaping how you perceive and connect. It's a practical yet deeply personal mirror, helping you understand your intuitive strengths and the energy you bring into every interaction. Take a moment to discover what drives your awareness and how you can deepen your connection with others. The journey begins with a single insight. Visit quiz.booksforgrowth.com to get started. That's quiz.books4growth.com. Again, quiz.booksforgrowth.com. Chapter 1: Beyond Words. The Silent Truth Teller. What they don't say speaks volumes. In a world where words can deceive and mislead, the truth often resides in the subtle arc of an eyebrow, the micro-expression that flashes across a face, or the unconscious shift in posture. While people carefully craft their verbal messages, their bodies often betray what truly lies beneath. This fundamental insight serves as our entry point into the intricate world of human behavior, where understanding what remains unspoken can reveal more than 1,000 carefully chosen words. The disparity between what people say and what their bodies express creates a fascinating window into human psychology. Research indicates that approximately 55% of communication is nonverbal, 38% is conveyed through tone of voice, and a mere 7% through actual words. This striking imbalance underscores why mastering the art of reading nonverbal cues is not merely helpful, it's essential for anyone seeking to truly understand others. When someone claims they're fine, while their clenched jaw, crossed arms, and averted gaze suggest otherwise, which message would you trust? The body rarely lies, even when the lips do. Throughout human history, our ability to detect subtle social signals preceded language itself. Our ancient ancestors relied on nonverbal communication for survival, developing an intuitive understanding of threats, opportunities, and social dynamics through observation alone. This evolutionary heritage remains embedded in our modern interactions, manifesting as unconscious behaviors that reveal our true feelings despite our best efforts to conceal them. While we've developed sophisticated language skills, Our primal nonverbal communication system continues to operate beneath our conscious awareness. The distinction between controlled verbal communication and spontaneous nonverbal behavior forms the foundation of our exploration in this chapter. We'll examine why nonverbal cues often provide a more reliable window into someone's authentic feelings and intentions. Consider how a person might meticulously craft a message to convince you of their confidence in a business proposal, yet their restless fingers, shifting gaze, and hesitant voice tell a completely different story. These inconsistencies between words and bodily expressions create what psychologists call leakage, unintentional signals that reveal the truth behind the verbal facade. This chapter represents our first step toward developing what might be called a sixth sense for human behavior, the ability to perceive and interpret the subtle cues that most people miss. We'll begin by establishing why nonverbal communication serves as a more honest indicator of true feelings. Exploring scenarios where verbal and nonverbal messages contradict each other, and providing practical techniques to assess body language accurately. By developing this skill, you'll gain unprecedented insight into the thoughts and feelings of those around you, allowing you to navigate social interactions with greater awareness and authenticity. The implications of mastering nonverbal communication extend far beyond casual social interactions. In subsequent chapters, we'll explore how these skills apply to crucial life domains, from building deeper personal relationships to gaining advantage in negotiations, detecting deception, and cultivating genuine charisma. We'll examine how cultural differences influence nonverbal expression, how to read emotional states with precision, and how to use your own body language to establish rapport and trust. This comprehensive approach will transform how you perceive and engage with the world around you. As we embark on this journey together, remember that reading people is not about manipulation or control. It's about developing a deeper understanding, fostering authentic connection, and navigating human relationships with greater wisdom and empathy. The ability to see beyond words allows you to respond to others' true needs rather than their surface presentations, creating opportunities for meaningful engagement that might otherwise remain hidden. In a world where misunderstanding and disconnection have become commonplace, these skills offer a pathway back to the kind of genuine human connection we all instinctively seek. The silent language of the body speaks volumes to those who know how to listen. Let's begin learning its eloquent vocabulary. The truth between words. She watched him across the dinner table, a man she had once known. His mouth spoke of love and commitment, but his shoulders hunched inward. His eyes darted to the exit every few minutes. His fingers drummed an anxious rhythm on the white tablecloth. "I've missed you so much," he said. His voice projected confidence, but his left hand twitched toward his phone, checking it for the third time in 5 minutes. "These past few weeks apart really made me realize what we have." Emily nodded, her fork pushing salmon around her plate. The restaurant hummed with conversation. Glasses clinked, and waiters moved between tables with practiced grace. A candle flickered between them, casting shadows that deepened the lines on his face. "That sounds nice, James," she said. She noted how his pupils failed to dilate when he looked at her, how his body angled slightly away from hers. The words sounded right, but everything else told a different story. This man, who claimed to miss her, couldn't maintain eye contact for more than 3 seconds. James reached across the table for her hand. His palm felt clammy. "I want us to try again. I've changed." His voice cracked on the last word. and his gaze dropped to the breadbasket. His knuckles whitened around his water glass. The waiter approached with dessert menus. Emily waved him away. The restaurant had filled with the evening crowd, the noise level rising, perfume and cologne mingling in the air. Outside, rain began to fall, droplets racing down the window beside their table. She had practiced this moment for days. She would listen not just to his words, but to everything else, the things he couldn't control. The way his foot tapped nervously under the table, how he touched his collar when speaking about the future. There was a slight strain in his laugh that never used to be there. "You know what I've learned while we were apart?" Emily asked, her voice steady. She met his gaze directly. "I've learned to trust what people show me more than what they tell me." She watched his reaction, the subtle widening of his eyes, the momentary freeze in his breathing, the way his shoulders stiffened. James leaned forward, his face arranged in an expression of confusion. But his body told her he understood perfectly. "What do you mean by that?" His words came out measured and careful, but his fingers curled into a loose fist on the table. The check arrived. Emily placed her credit card on the small tray without looking at the total. Around them, other diners laughed and talked, unaware of the silent communication happening at their table, the language of shifting eyes, tightened jaws, and defensive postures that spoke volumes more than any rehearsed speech. "I mean that I deserve someone whose words and actions tell the same story," she said. A weight lifted from her chest. She didn't need to hear his explanation. His body had already confessed everything his words tried to hide. She wondered how many truths she had missed before she learned to read this essential, primal language that humans spoke without speaking at all. What truths might we discover about those around us? And perhaps even more importantly, about ourselves, if we paid closer attention to the silent conversations our bodies conduct while our mouths speak carefully chosen words. The hierarchy of truth, when actions speak louder. When someone says, "I'm fine," while their shoulders slump, their voice cracks, and their eyes dart away, which message do you believe? Human communication operates on multiple channels simultaneously, and these channels don't always align. Our words, carefully chosen and consciously controlled, often tell one story, while our bodies reveal another. Think of nonverbal communication as the original human language. Long before our ancestors developed speech, they communicated through gestures, facial expressions, and body movements. This primitive communication system remains hardwired in our brains, operating largely below conscious awareness. When we feel fear, our pupils dilate and our breathing quickens. Physiological responses that evolved over millions of years, impossible to fake convincingly. Words, by contrast, are newcomers to the communication landscape. They offer precision and complexity, but require conscious thought to formulate. This gives them a fundamental weakness as truth tellers. They can be deliberately manipulated with relative ease. Anyone can say, "I'm not nervous," while their sweaty palms and trembling voice betray their anxiety. The body reveals what words conceal. It's like an underground river flowing beneath the carefully constructed verbal landscape above. While we meticulously arrange our verbal garden, planting specific words and pruning away unwanted ones, the underground current of nonverbal cues flows according to its own natural laws, occasionally bubbling up to the surface in ways we cannot fully control. Research consistently confirms this truth hierarchy. Studies show that when verbal and nonverbal messages conflict, observers trust the nonverbal. Professor Albert Mehrabian's famous research suggested that in communications about feelings and attitudes, words account for only 7% of the total message, with vocal tone contributing 38% and body language dominating at 55%. While these exact percentages have been debated, the underlying principle holds true. Nonverbal cues typically provide more reliable emotional information than words alone. Our bodies respond to emotions faster than our conscious minds can process them. When we experience fear, our amygdala, a primitive part of the brain, triggers physiological responses before our thinking brain even registers the emotion. This means our initial nonverbal reaction often happens automatically, revealing our true response before we can verbally craft an alternative narrative. When verbal and nonverbal communications clash, trust what the body reveals. It speaks a more ancient and honest language than words ever could. The revealing contradictions. Imagine sitting across from a job candidate who confidently states, "I work extremely well under pressure," while nervously tapping their foot, repeatedly touching their face, and avoiding eye contact. These conflicting signals create what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, a mental discomfort arising from contradictory messages. Your brain, evolved to detect threats and insincerity, immediately flags this disconnect. These contradictions appear across countless interpersonal scenarios. In romantic relationships, a partner might verbally express commitment while physically creating distance, leaning away during conversations, crossing arms defensively, or consistently finding reasons to avoid physical touch. The verbal promise of dedication contradicts the physical retreat, creating relationship tension that often remains unaddressed because the words seem acceptable on the surface. Nonverbal leakage reveals the truth in professional settings, too. A colleague might claim to support your proposal in a meeting while subtly shaking their head, sighing, or displaying a micro-expression of contempt, a momentary curl of the upper lip that flashes across their face in a fraction of a second. Their words say yes, but their body screams no. Consider how political communication exemplifies this phenomenon on a larger scale. Politicians master the art of saying the right things while their bodies sometimes tell a different story. During debates, candidates might verbally express respect for opponents while their facial expressions reveal disgust or contempt. These micro-expressions, involuntary emotional displays lasting less than a fifth of a second, offer glimpses into their genuine feelings despite carefully crafted verbal messages. The world of sales and negotiation provides particularly rich examples of verbal-nonverbal disconnects. A car salesperson might insist, "This is absolutely our best price," while displaying signals of deception, decreased eye contact, increased blinking rate, or unnatural stillness. Their words convey certainty, but their body betrays discomfort with the deception. What makes these contradictions so telling is that most people focus primarily on words. We're educated to analyze verbal content, to parse logical arguments and semantic meanings. Yet beneath this conscious processing, our brains continuously scan nonverbal channels. Have you ever had an unexplained negative reaction to someone despite their perfectly pleasant words? Your conscious mind processed their verbal message, while your unconscious registered threatening nonverbal cues. Parents witness this disconnect daily with children who haven't yet mastered verbal deception. A child might deny taking cookies while chocolate smudges their face, and guilty body language, lowered head, hidden hands, or shuffling feet reveals the truth. As we age, our verbal deception skills improve, but our bodies continue to leak truth through nonverbal channels. The business world abounds with examples. Consider the manager who announces, "My door is always open," while maintaining an intimidating posture, rarely making eye contact with subordinates, and creating physical barriers in their office arrangement. Their verbal invitation for communication clashes with the forbidding nonverbal environment they create, and employees instinctively respond to the latter. Sometimes the disconnection appears in subtle temporal differences. In authentic communication, emotional displays follow a natural pattern. They emerge, peak, and fade smoothly. When someone forces an emotion verbally that doesn't match their internal state, their nonverbal timing often feels off. The smile that appears too quickly after a statement, or the anger that dissipates the moment a conversation ends, signals potential incongruence between words and true feelings. When someone's words and body language tell different stories, which narrator will you trust? The conscious mind that can craft convenient fictions, or the body that reveals truths we often wish to hide? The Silent Decoder's Toolkit. Becoming fluent in the language of nonverbal communication requires deliberate practice and systematic observation. Just as you wouldn't expect to learn French overnight, reading body language demands consistent attention to detail and contextual awareness. The rewards, however, far exceed the effort invested. The first step in developing this skill involves training yourself to observe holistically. Most people focus exclusively on faces during conversations, missing crucial information conveyed by posture, hand movements, and lower body positioning. Expand your attentional field to capture the entire person, noticing how different body parts may tell different parts of the emotional story. Context matters enormously when interpreting nonverbal cues. A crossed arm position might indicate defensiveness in one situation, but simply mean the person feels cold in another. Effective nonverbal decoding requires considering baseline behaviors, cultural differences, environmental factors, and the relationship between multiple cues rather than isolating single gestures. Think of nonverbal communication as a constellation of signals rather than individual stars. One cue alone rarely tells the complete story, but clusters of consistent behaviors provide reliable insights. When someone's words, facial expressions, body positioning, and vocal tone all align, you can generally trust the message. When these channels contradict each other, pay special attention to the involuntary channels that people control less consciously. Nonverbal fluency develops through structured practice, much like developing any perceptual skill. You wouldn't expect to become a wine connoisseur without tasting numerous varieties and learning to distinguish subtle flavor notes. Similarly, becoming adept at reading people requires exposing yourself to diverse interaction scenarios and gradually refining your perceptual abilities. The N-verse Framework, Nonverbal Evaluation and Recognition System for Emotional Intelligence. The N-verse Framework offers a systematic approach to decoding nonverbal communication. This 5-component system transforms casual observation into structured analysis, enabling more accurate interpretation of the silent messages continuously exchanged during human interaction. Component 1. Baseline Behavior Assessment. The foundation of accurate nonverbal interpretation begins with establishing a behavioral baseline for each individual. People have unique mannerisms, cultural expressions, and habitual movements that constitute their neutral state. Without understanding this baseline, you risk misinterpreting normal behaviors as significant signals. To establish a baseline, observe the person in relaxed, low-stakes situations. Notice their typical posture and body positioning, gesture frequency and amplitude, blinking rate and eye movement patterns, speaking pace and vocal tone range, default facial expressions. This baseline provides the context against which you'll measure deviations. A naturally fidgety person who suddenly becomes still might be experiencing heightened focus or anxiety, while the same stillness in normally composed individuals would carry different significance. Component 2. Congruence analysis. This component focuses on alignment between different communication channels. Analyze the consistency between verbal content, what is said, vocal characteristics, how it's said, facial expressions, body language, physiological responses, blushing, perspiration, etc. When these channels align, communication likely reflects genuine feelings. When they conflict, such as positive words delivered with negative facial expressions, the less consciously controlled channels typically reveal the more authentic message. The congruence analysis works by flagging misalignments. For instance, if someone verbally agrees while subtly shaking their head no, this incongruence signals a potential reservation or disagreement they're not expressing verbally. Component 3. Cluster recognition. Individual nonverbal cues can be ambiguous, but clusters of related behaviors provide more reliable information. Rather than interpreting single gestures, look for constellations of cues that collectively suggest specific emotional states. For example, an engagement cluster might include forward lean, increased eye contact, nodding, mirrored behaviors, animated facial expressions. Conversely, a disengagement cluster might include backward lean, reduced eye contact, crossed arms, foot pointing away, blank facial expression. These clusters offer much stronger evidence of internal states than any isolated behavior. Component 4. Transition monitoring. Emotional states aren't static. They flow and transform throughout interactions. This component focuses on the moments when nonverbal behavior changes, which often reveals reactions to specific topics, statements, or events. Pay special attention to sudden shifts in body position, changes in breathing patterns, facial microexpressions, brief emotional displays lasting fractions of a second, alterations in voice quality or speaking pace. These transitions, especially when they occur in response to particular topics, often provide insight into emotional triggers and areas of sensitivity. Component 5. Environmental contextual integration. The final component acknowledges that nonverbal behavior doesn't exist in a vacuum. Environmental factors significantly influence how people express themselves nonverbally, and accurate interpretation requires considering physical setting, formal, informal, public, private, social context, power dynamics, relationship history, cultural frameworks, immediate circumstances, time pressure, comfort factors. A behavior that indicates discomfort in one context might be perfectly normal in another. For example, reduced eye contact might suggest deception in some Western context, but respect in certain Asian cultures. The N-verse framework operates as an integrated system, with each component informing the others. Baseline assessment provides the foundation, Congruence analysis identifies potential areas of interest. Cluster recognition strengthens interpretations. Transition monitoring reveals emotional triggers. And contextual integration ensures appropriate interpretation within specific situations. With practice, this systematic approach becomes increasingly intuitive, allowing you to move beyond simplistic body language dictionaries toward a nuanced understanding of how nonverbal cues function within complex human interactions. By mastering nonverbal communication through frameworks like Nverse, you gain access to the unspoken truths that words alone cannot reveal, enabling a deeper understanding of others' genuine feelings and intentions, while fostering more authentic connections based on what people truly communicate rather than merely what they say. Protect your mind from hidden manipulation. If you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling uneasy but couldn't explain why, you're not alone. Reading people's body language often reveals subtle truths, yet beneath those cues, manipulation can still hide in plain sight. I've met so many people who, like me, once mistook charm for honesty and persuasion for care. It's a painful lesson. Not everyone who smiles at you has your best interest at heart. The more I learned to read unspoken cues, the more I realized how vital it is to also defend yourself from those who use psychological tactics to influence, confuse, or control. True understanding isn't just about seeing others clearly. It's about protecting your emotional independence. That's why I've partnered with Books for Growth to create a powerful free resource called Emotional Manipulation Defense. This guide goes beyond awareness. It equips you with proven strategies to identify manipulation, stay mentally grounded, and confidently reclaim control of your decisions and emotions. Inside, you'll find clear, actionable methods to recognize when someone's words and actions don't align. The same skill you're developing right here in this audiobook. Don't let anyone else write your story. Take the next step in mastering both understanding and protection by downloading your free copy today. Visit manipulation.booksforgrowth.com to get started. That's manipulation.books4growth.com. Again, manipulation.booksforgrowth.com.
I hope you are enjoying my audiobook so far. It would be a pleasure if you could let me know how you are feeling about this audiobook in the comment section below. We would greatly appreciate it if you could also like this video and subscribe to United Audiobooks to have access to more best-selling audiobooks in the future. Also, if you are interested in getting more free audiobooks, please click the first link in the description below. Now, let us carry on with the next chapter.
Chapter 2: Cultural Codes. Decoding Global Gestures. Beyond words, when the nod that means yes actually means no. In the crowded marketplace of a Tokyo suburb, an American businessman extends his hand to seal a deal. His Japanese counterpart bows slightly. The American, confused, reaches further, interpreting the bow as reluctance. In that fleeting moment, an opportunity dissolves, not because of disagreement, but misinterpretation. Every day, similar scenarios unfold around the world, where the silent language of gestures, expressions, and body positions speaks volumes, often drowning out the words we actually say. What we perceive as universal truths in nonverbal communication are, in reality, deeply coded messages written by centuries of cultural evolution. The myth of universal body language has persisted for decades, giving rise to simplistic interpretations that promise to unlock human behavior regardless of background. Yet reality paints a more complex picture. A gesture that signals agreement in New York might signal insult in New Delhi. The confident, direct gaze valued in Western business context can be perceived as aggressive or disrespectful in parts of East Asia. These cultural differences aren't merely interesting footnotes. They form the backbone of human connection in our increasingly interconnected world. Understanding this cultural dimension of nonverbal cues isn't merely an academic exercise, but a practical necessity. When we misread cultural signals, the consequences range from minor embarrassment to significant relationship damage. The American executive who interprets a Japanese colleague's averted gaze as dishonesty rather than respect operates at a disadvantage. The European tourist who uses the OK hand sign in Brazil unknowingly delivers an obscene gesture. In both cases, the failure lies not in intention, but in cultural literacy. The significance of these cultural differences is magnified in today's global landscape. Remote work connects colleagues across continents. International travel brings us face-to-face with different communication styles. Business negotiations increasingly cross cultural boundaries. In each scenario, our ability to accurately decode nonverbal behaviors directly impacts our personal and professional success. Those who develop cultural sensitivity gain a decisive advantage in building genuine connections and navigating complex social interactions. What makes this challenge particularly fascinating is that most cultural codes operate below conscious awareness. We learn the nonverbal language of our culture through immersion rather than instruction, absorbing patterns from childhood that feel innately right or natural. This unconscious programming creates the perfect conditions for misunderstanding. We interpret others' behaviors through our cultural lens, often unaware we're using the wrong translation key. Breaking this pattern requires conscious effort and cultural humility. In this chapter, we'll explore how cultural backgrounds fundamentally shape the way we express and interpret nonverbal behaviors. We'll examine specific examples from diverse cultures, from the meaning of silence in Nordic countries to the intricate hand gestures of Mediterranean communication, and identify common misunderstandings that emerge when these systems collide. You'll discover how facial expressions, physical distance, touch, and timing carry dramatically different meanings across cultural contexts. Most importantly, we'll develop practical strategies for enhancing your cross-cultural communication skills. You'll learn techniques for suspending judgment, recognizing your own cultural biases, and adapting your nonverbal behaviors appropriately. These aren't merely theoretical concepts, but actionable approaches that build authentic connections across cultural divides. By the end of this chapter, you'll possess a more nuanced understanding of how to read people in our multicultural world, moving beyond simplified formulas to embrace the beautiful complexity of human expression. The path to truly understanding others requires us to recognize that nonverbal communication isn't universal, but contextual. When we approach cross-cultural interactions with awareness and flexibility, we transform potential misunderstandings into opportunities for genuine connection. In a world where differences often divide, the ability to accurately read and respect cultural codes becomes not just a social skill, but a bridge to human understanding. The silent space between worlds. The light through the hostel window fell across Tomas's face, waking him earlier than he had hoped. Tokyo buzzed outside, a city of 10 million souls moving in synchrony, which he still couldn't comprehend. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and remembered the business meeting scheduled for 10 o'clock. His first international negotiation without senior management oversight. He dressed with care, American precision in every movement. The tie, red and bold, knotted with military exactness. The suit pressed crisp. Shoes that gleamed like black mirrors. In the bathroom mirror, he practiced his smile, his handshake, his confident gaze. Direct eye contact had served him well in New York, Chicago, and even London. It projected honesty, confidence, and capability. The Japanese firm needed to see these qualities in him if the partnership would proceed. On the subway, Tomas rehearsed his presentation points. The car swayed and bodies pressed close in Tokyo's morning crush. A Japanese businessman accidentally bumped into him, bowed slightly with downcast eyes, and murmured something Tomas couldn't understand. Tomas nodded back, meeting the man's gaze directly with a smile. The businessman looked away quickly, his body language shifting subtly. Discomfort? Embarrassment? Tomas couldn't read it. Cultural briefing didn't cover enough, he thought, feeling sweat form at his collar despite the aggressive air conditioning. The subway doors opened at a stop. He remembered his colleague Maria's warning after her own failed negotiation in Seoul. The mistake wasn't in the numbers, she had told him, nursing a whiskey at the airport lounge. It was everything I wasn't saying. My body language screamed American arrogance to them. I thought I was showing confidence. The memory troubled him as he navigated the crowded station, every face around him unreadable in ways faces back home never were. Tomas stood before the gleaming skyscraper that housed Nakamura Industries. Inside his briefcase, 6 months of work, projections, proposals. His phone vibrated, a message from headquarters wishing him luck. He looked down at his watch. American-made, reliable. 20 minutes early, perfect in New York terms. He wondered suddenly if punctuality meant the same thing here. The doorman bowed slightly as Tomas approached. Tomas hesitated, then bowed in return, deeper than the doorman had. The man's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Surprise? Amusement? Respect? The meaning floated just beyond Tomas's grasp. The elevator carried him upward, glass walls revealing Tokyo stretching to the horizon. Beautiful and incomprehensible, like a code he knew existed but couldn't crack. The memory of his international business professor came to him. Your biggest failures abroad won't be linguistic. They'll be in the 1,000 little movements, expressions, and gestures you've never had to think about before. Tomas adjusted his tie again, suddenly unsure about the red. Was it aggressive here? Presumptuous? The boardroom floor appeared on the digital display. His heart pounded against his ribs like something was trying to escape. The doors slid open onto the 72nd floor. Across the lobby, through glass walls, Tomas saw them waiting. 5 Japanese executives, arranged with geometric precision around a table. No one smiled. No one's eyes met his through the glass. Their faces revealed nothing to him. He stepped forward, wondering, in a world where every gesture carries weight, how do you speak when your body itself speaks a foreign language? The cultural lens of nonverbal communication. When we interact with others, our bodies speak volumes. A subtle nod, a firm handshake, or a warm smile. These nonverbal cues shape our conversations in ways we rarely acknowledge consciously. But what if these seemingly universal gestures mean something entirely different to the person you're speaking with? Cultural background acts as a powerful filter through which we interpret nonverbal behaviors. Research by anthropologist Edward T. Hall showed that over 65% of all communication is nonverbal. Yet the meanings we assign to these signals vary drastically from one culture to another. What happens as a sign of respect in New York might be perceived as an insult in New Delhi. The subtle language of our bodies, seemingly intuitive and natural, is actually learned through years of cultural immersion. Think of cultural differences in nonverbal communication as different dialects of the same language. Just as English speakers from Australia, America, and England use different vocabulary and expressions while speaking the same language, people from different cultures might use similar physical gestures, but assign them completely different meanings. A thumbs up in America signals approval, but in parts of the Middle East and West Africa, this innocent gesture carries deeply offensive connotations. The consequences of misreading cultural nonverbal cues extend beyond simple confusion. Business deals have collapsed, diplomatic relations have soured, and personal relationships have fractured due to misunderstood gestures. In one documented case, an American executive lost a multi-million-dollar contract in Japan because he kept his hands in his pockets during introductions. A casual stance in the US, but perceived as disrespectful in Japanese business culture. These high-stakes misunderstandings highlight how crucial cultural literacy becomes in our increasingly interconnected world. Cultural background does not just influence how we express ourselves nonverbally, it fundamentally shapes what we see when others communicate with us. Through different eyes, cultural variations in nonverbal behavior. Eye contact represents perhaps the most striking example of how nonverbal communication differs across cultures. In North American and many European cultures, direct eye contact conveys confidence, honesty, and attentiveness. People are taught from childhood to look others in the eye when speaking. Yet the same behavior carries dramatically different meanings elsewhere. In many East Asian cultures, prolonged eye contact, especially with authority figures, can be interpreted as confrontational or disrespectful. Japanese children learn to focus their gaze on the neck or throat area when speaking with elders. Similarly, in numerous indigenous communities across North America and among many cultures in the Middle East, lowering one's gaze demonstrates respect rather than disinterest or dishonesty. These differences extend to personal space as well. Anthropologists have documented that Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, and Latin American cultures typically maintain closer physical distances during conversations than North Americans or Northern Europeans. What feels like an intimate zone reserved for close friends in Stockholm might be perfectly appropriate for casual acquaintances in Mexico City. One American exchange student in Brazil reported feeling constantly crowded during the first months of her stay, until she recognized that her Brazilian friends weren't being intrusive. They were simply operating within their cultural norms of proximity. Facial expressions offer another fascinating study in cultural variation. While research by Paul Ekman suggests that basic emotions, happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, surprise, and anger, may be universally recognized, the rules governing their display vary dramatically. Display rules, cultural determined standards about when, where, and how emotions should be expressed, create significant differences in expressiveness across cultures. The Japanese concept of han, true feelings, versus tatemai, public behavior, illustrates this principle perfectly. Many Japanese individuals learn to mask negative emotions in public settings, prioritizing group harmony over individual expression. This contrasts sharply with American culture, which often values emotional authenticity and transparency. An American might interpret a Japanese colleague's reserved response as lack of enthusiasm, while the Japanese person might find the American's expressiveness overwhelming or inappropriate. Physical touch in greetings demonstrates how deeply cultural differences can affect everyday interactions. While the firm handshake is the business standard in America and much of Europe, it would be considered strange in parts of East Asia where bowing is customary. In the Middle East, men often greet male friends with kisses on the cheek, a greeting that might cause discomfort for many American men unfamiliar with this practice. Meanwhile, In Thailand, the Y, a slight bow with palms pressed together, serves as the traditional greeting, with specific variations depending on relative social status. Gestures we take for granted can become unexpected pitfalls in cross-cultural communication. The OK sign, thumb and index finger forming a circle, signals approval in America, but represents an obscene insult in Brazil. Beckoning someone with the index finger is common in the United States, but is reserved for animals in the Philippines and considered rude in many Asian countries. Pointing with one finger is acceptable in many Western contexts, but viewed as impolite across much of Asia, where indicating objects or directions with the entire hand or a subtle nod is preferred. The way we track and use time, what anthropologists call chronemics, also vary significantly between cultures. In monochronic cultures like Switzerland, Germany, and the United States, punctuality is highly valued, and arriving late may signal disrespect or carelessness. By contrast, polychronic cultures, such as those in Latin America, Southern Europe, and the Middle East, often approach time more fluidly, prioritizing the completion of human interactions over strict adherence to schedules. An American waiting for a tardy Brazilian colleague might interpret the delay as rudeness, while the Brazilian might not consider a 15-minute delay significant. These misalignments in nonverbal expectations create what anthropologist Edward T. Hall termed silent language barriers, invisible yet powerful obstacles to cross-cultural understanding. Like hidden currents beneath a seemingly calm surface, these unspoken differences can pull cross-cultural interactions off course despite both parties' best intentions. How might your own cultural background be creating invisible filters through which you interpret the nonverbal cues of others, potentially leading to misunderstandings you're not even aware of? Building cultural bridges in nonverbal communication. Developing cultural sensitivity in nonverbal communication begins with self-awareness. Most of us remain unconscious of the cultural programming that shapes our interpretations of body language, facial expressions, and spatial relationships. The first step toward improvement involves recognizing that our own nonverbal habits aren't universal truths, but culturally determined patterns. Cross-cultural research have identified several specific competencies that enhance nonverbal cultural sensitivity. These include knowledge, understanding cultural differences, mindfulness, paying attention to one's assumptions and reactions, and behavioral flexibility, adapting one's nonverbal communication style to different cultural contexts. A study conducted at the University of Michigan found that international business professionals who received training in these areas reported 40% fewer cross-cultural misunderstandings than untrained colleagues. Practical strategies for improving cross-cultural nonverbal communication include observation before participation. When entering an unfamiliar cultural environment, take time to observe how locals interact with each other. Notice greeting rituals, conversational distances, levels of expressiveness, and touching behaviors before attempting to engage. This approach resembles learning to swim by first watching those who are already comfortable in the water, observing their techniques before diving in yourself. Developing tolerance for ambiguity represents another critical skill in cross-cultural interactions. When faced with unfamiliar nonverbal cues, resist the urge to make immediate judgments. Instead, adopt what psychologists call a cultural relativist perspective, the understanding that behaviors must be interpreted within their cultural context rather than by your home culture's standards. The Bridge Framework for Cross-Cultural Nonverbal Communication. The Bridge Framework offers a systematic approach to developing cultural sensitivity in nonverbal communication. Each letter represents a key component of the process. B. Baseline awareness. The foundation of cross-cultural nonverbal competence begins with recognizing your own cultural programming. This component involves critical self-reflection about your nonverbal habits and the values they reflect. For example, if you're from the United States, you might realize that your comfort with direct eye contact reflects cultural values of individualism and egalitarianism rather than universal human behavior. This baseline awareness also includes identifying your automatic judgments when encountering different nonverbal styles. Do you perceive less expressive cultures as cold? Do you find high contact cultures invasive? Recognizing these reactions helps neutralize their influence on your interactions. R. Research cultural context. This component focuses on developing knowledge about specific cultural differences in nonverbal communication. This includes understanding variations in proxemics, personal space preferences, oculesics, eye contact norms, haptics, touching behaviors, kinestics, gestures and body movements, chronemics, attitudes toward time, paralanguage, vocal cues beyond words. This research might involve consulting cultural guidebooks, scholarly resources on cross-cultural communication, or seeking guidance from cultural insiders. The goal isn't to memorize an exhaustive list of do's and don'ts, but to develop general awareness of major differences. I. Interpret through multiple cultural lenses. This component develops the habit of considering multiple potential interpretations of nonverbal behaviors. When encountering an unfamiliar gesture or expression, the framework encourages asking, how might this behavior be interpreted in the person's home culture? What function might it serve? What values might it reflect? For example, if a Japanese business partner avoids eye contact during a negotiation, the framework prompts considering that this might demonstrate respect rather than evasiveness. This multiple perspective approach prevents hasty judgments based on one's own cultural norms. D. Develop adaptability. This component focuses on behavioral flexibility, the ability to modify your nonverbal style to accommodate different cultural contexts. This doesn't mean completely abandoning your own cultural identity, but instead developing a repertoire of behaviors appropriate for various situations. Practical exercises for developing adaptability include practicing different greeting styles, bows, handshakes, cheek kisses, and experimenting with varying degrees of expressiveness, personal space, and eye contact. The goal is to expand your nonverbal vocabulary so you can communicate effectively across cultural boundaries. G. Generate bridge behaviors. This component focuses on finding common ground through nonverbal behaviors that transcend cultural differences. Research suggests that certain expressions of warmth, such as the genuine smile, known as the Duchenne smile, involving both the mouth and eyes, are universally recognized across cultures. Bridge behaviors might include sincere smiles, open posture, respectful attention, appropriate humor, mirroring, subtly adapting elements of the other person's communication style. These behaviors help establish a connection even when specific nonverbal codes differ between cultures. E. Engage in continuous learning. The final component recognizes that cultural competence is not a destination, but an ongoing process. This involves seeking feedback on your nonverbal communication from cultural insiders, reflecting on cross-cultural interactions to identify what worked and what didn't, updating your knowledge as cultures evolve and change, developing relationships across cultural boundaries to deepen understanding, This continuous learning approach prevents ossification of cultural knowledge into stereotypes and acknowledges the dynamic nature of cultural communication. The bridge framework operates dynamically, with each component reinforcing the others. Baseline awareness leads to more targeted research, which enhances interpretation skills. Better interpretation facilitates adaptability, which helps generate effective bridge behaviors. Successful engagement leads to deeper awareness, continuing the cycle of improvement. In practice, the framework might look like this. Before a business trip to Japan, an American executive researches Japanese nonverbal customs, research, while reflecting on her own cultural tendencies toward direct eye contact and firm handshakes, baseline awareness. During meetings, she modifies her usual direct gaze when speaking with senior executives, adaptability, while considering multiple interpretations of her Japanese colleagues' more reserved expressions, interpretation. She employs universally recognized signals of respect and attentiveness, bridge behaviors, while remaining open to feedback and new information, engagement. Case studies demonstrate the framework's effectiveness. One multinational company implemented the bridge approach in their cross-cultural training program and reported a 35% reduction in reported communication misunderstandings among international teams within 6 months. Understanding cultural variations in nonverbal communication isn't simply an academic exercise. It's a practical necessity for meaningful connection in our global society. By recognizing the impact of cultural background on interpretation, studying specific differences between cultures, and developing strategies for enhanced cultural sensitivity, we can transform potential misunderstandings into opportunities for deeper human connection. The reflection pause. You've now seen how culture can alter every gesture, every unspoken cue, and how easily our assumptions can mislead us. Before moving forward, take a moment to acknowledge how far you've come. Most people drift through life blind to the silent conversations unfolding around them. Yet, here you are, learning to see, training your perception, deepening your empathy, and expanding your awareness of what it truly means to understand another human being. Reading people isn't about control or advantage. It's about presence. It's the quiet moment of recognition when words fall away and you simply get someone. Every nod, hesitation, and subtle shift tells a story. By now, you've probably begun to notice these stories everywhere, in your coworkers' micro-expressions, your partner's tone changes, or a stranger's fleeting glance. This awareness is no small achievement. It's the foundation of emotional intelligence and authentic connection. And now, I'd like to invite you to take this awareness one step further. There are countless listeners out there, students of communication, professionals, and curious observers, who, like you, are searching for a reliable guide to help them decode the human experience. Your voice can help them find it. By taking a brief moment to leave an honest review of this audiobook, you offer more than feedback. You extend a hand to someone who might still be struggling to interpret the language of human behavior. A single review may seem insignificant, but its ripple effects are powerful. It helps genuine seekers discover insight instead of misinformation. It keeps this project alive so more people can learn to read others with empathy and integrity. Your reflections, what resonated, what surprised you, and what changed your perspective, could be exactly what another listener needs to continue their own journey toward connection. Thank you for sharing in this mission of understanding. In a world often dominated by noise, your quiet act of goodwill becomes part of a larger conversation, one that helps more people see, listen, and connect beneath the surface. P.S. Your review doesn't have to be long or polished, just honest. Think of it as one final gesture of empathy, one human signal reaching another across the silence. Chapter 3: The Art of Adaptation, Refining Nonverbal Intelligence. Beyond static skills, the evolution of your nonverbal intelligence. The ability to read another person's unspoken signals isn't a static talent. It's a living, evolving skill that demands perpetual refinement. Like learning a complex language, mastering nonverbal communication requires an adaptive mind, one that continuously integrates new observations, adjusts previous assumptions, and applies refined interpretations in real time. This dynamic approach distinguishes the truly perceptive observer from the casual people watcher. Consider how often you've misinterpreted a subtle gesture or facial expression, only to realize your mistake after further interaction. These moments aren't failures. They're invaluable learning opportunities. True nonverbal intelligence isn't about perfect initial accuracy, but about cultivating the flexibility to adjust your interpretations as new information emerges. The most skilled readers of people embrace these moments of recalibration, understanding that each adjustment sharpens their perceptual abilities. What separates novices from experts in this domain isn't just accumulated knowledge, but the capacity for real-time adaptation. While foundational understanding of nonverbal cues provides essential groundwork, the social landscape constantly shifts beneath our feet. Cultural contexts evolve, individual differences abound, and new research continuously reshapes our understanding of human behavior. In this environment, rigid interpretations quickly become outdated and potentially misleading. The adaptive observer. The journey toward nonverbal mastery requires us to become perpetual students of human behavior. We must regularly update our mental models with fresh insights from behavioral research, psychological studies, and cross-cultural observations. The most astute readers of nonverbal communication maintain a delicate balance between confidence in their interpretations and openness to revising those interpretations when evidence suggests otherwise. This intellectual humility, recognizing the limits of our current understanding, paradoxically strengthens our overall perception abilities. Throughout this chapter, we'll explore 3 critical dimensions of adaptive nonverbal intelligence. First, we'll examine how continuous learning and recalibration form the backbone of advanced people reading skills. Rather than viewing nonverbal communication as a set of fixed rules to memorize, we'll approach it as a dynamic system requiring ongoing engagement and refinement. Second, we'll investigate practical methods for incorporating real-time feedback into your observational practice, developing the metacognitive awareness that allows you to evaluate and improve your interpretations in the moment. Finally, we'll address how these adaptive skills can be applied across diverse social contexts, from professional settings to intimate relationships, each with its unique nonverbal landscape. The truly adept observer doesn't simply apply the same interpretive framework universally, but modifies their approach based on the specific environment, relationship dynamics, and individual differences at play. This contextual flexibility represents the highest evolution of nonverbal intelligence. The path to mastery isn't found in memorizing an exhaustive catalog of gestures and expressions, but in developing a responsive, adaptable approach to human connection. By embracing the art of adaptation, you'll transform your ability to read between the lines of human interaction, not just recognizing what people are communicating now, but anticipating how those communications might evolve. This dynamic perspective on nonverbal intelligence ultimately creates deeper, more authentic connections and provides unprecedented insights into the complex, beautiful language we speak without words. The unspoken realm. The coffee shop buzzed with afternoon chatter. Mark sat in the corner, watching people from behind his laptop screen. His anthropology thesis deadline loomed 3 weeks away, but his mind kept drifting to the conference presentation he would give tomorrow. Speaking had never troubled him, but understanding how people received his ideas, that silent language of folded arms, tilted heads, and wandering eyes, remained a mystery. He sipped his coffee, now cold. The barista caught his eye and offered a warm-up with a raised pot and lifted eyebrows. Mark nodded, then wondered if his nod conveyed enough gratitude. The woman's smile widened as she approached. Her movements revealed confidence, walking straight through the maze of chairs without a glance down. "You've been watching people for an hour," she said, refilling his cup. "Research or creepy hobby?" Mark felt heat rise in his neck. "Research. I present at a conference tomorrow on nonverbal communication patterns across cultures." The words sounded stiff, even to him. "So you're learning how to read people?" She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yet you miss that guy by the window is about to propose. See how he keeps touching his pocket?" Mark turned. A young man fidgeted at a table, his hand indeed returning to his jacket pocket every few seconds. His gaze darted between his phone and the door. "I would have missed that," Mark admitted. "I know the theory, but applying it in real time, there's a gap between knowing and seeing." The barista, Sarah, according to her name tag, leaned against the counter. "My psychology professor said we process something like 90% of communication without words. But nobody teaches that skill. We're supposed to pick it up through trial and error, like learning to swim by drowning a few times." Mark closed his laptop. "That's precisely my research focus. How do we adapt our nonverbal literacy in real time? I've spent 3 years studying it. But watching you work this room, you read everyone instantly." Sarah shrugged. 10 years in service. You learn to read people, or you don't survive." She nodded toward a businessman in the corner. "He'll want his check in about 30 seconds. See how he's gathering his papers?" Mark studied the man. Nothing seemed obvious until the man checked his watch and began closing his notebook. Sarah was already moving toward him with a receipt. "You should come to my presentation," Mark said when she returned. "Your practical experience might be more valuable than my theoretical framework." "Maybe I will," she said. "What time?" Mark told her, surprised at his own invitation. He watched her return to work, noting how she adjusted her communication style for each customer, leaning in for the elderly, maintaining distance with the harried business types, laughing easily with the regulars. She practiced what had taken him years to understand in theory. The door opened, and a young woman entered, moving toward the fidgeting man by the window. His face transformed, fear and joy battling for dominance. He stood awkwardly, then embraced her. Mark watched, cataloging each gesture, each micro-expression. Sarah appeared beside him. "You know what your research is missing? The understanding that learning to read people isn't just observation, it's participation. You can't learn to dance by watching dancers." Mark considered this. His academic approach had always maintained observer distance. "You think I need to engage more?" "I think nonverbal communication is a conversation, not a monologue," she said. "Your body is always speaking, whether you're aware of it or not." The couple by the window was laughing now. The man hadn't proposed yet, but his hand no longer checked his pocket compulsively. Mark wondered how many such moments he had missed in his own life, failing to read the signals or respond appropriately. How might our understanding of human connection transform if we approach nonverbal communication not as fixed knowledge to acquire, but as a living language demanding continuous adaptation and response? The dynamic nature of nonverbal intelligence. Nonverbal communication is never static. It evolves constantly, shaped by culture, context, and individual differences. To truly master the art of reading body language, you must commit to a lifelong process of learning and adaptation. This commitment separates casual observers from those who genuinely understand the subtle language of the body. Think of nonverbal intelligence as a living garden rather than a static photograph. Gardens require constant attention, pruning, and adaptation to changing seasons and conditions. Similarly, your ability to read people needs regular nurturing and adjustment based on new experiences and insights. Yesterday's interpretation may not apply to today's interaction because contexts shift, relationships evolve, and people change. Research consistently shows that experts in nonverbal communication share one critical trait. They approach each interaction with genuine curiosity and an openness to being wrong. A study by Dr. David Matsumoto at San Francisco State University found that the most accurate interpreters of nonverbal cues are those who regularly question their own assumptions and actively seek feedback about their interpretations. They understand that mastery comes not from being right all the time, but from learning rapidly when they're wrong. This continuous learning approach must be deliberate and structured. Start by cataloging patterns you observe in daily interactions. Notice how the same gesture might communicate different things in different contexts. Record when your interpretations are confirmed or contradicted. Create personal notes of nonverbal patterns unique to individuals in your life. Some people might touch their face when lying, while others might do so when deep in thought. Learning these individual differences requires patience and systematic observation. The brain naturally looks for patterns and shortcuts. Once we think we understand a particular cue, we tend to apply that understanding universally. This cognitive bias can severely limit our ability to accurately read others. Effective adaptation requires us to hold our own interpretations lightly, always remaining open to new data that might contradict our existing understanding. Cultural variations add another layer of complexity. A gesture considered friendly in one culture might be deeply offensive in another. Research by Matsumoto also demonstrated that even professional interrogators and law enforcement officers make significant errors when interpreting nonverbal cues across cultural boundaries. The solution isn't to memorize an encyclopedia of cultural differences, but to develop an adaptive mindset that seeks clarification rather than jumping to conclusions. Technology and modern living continually reshape nonverbal communication. Video conferencing has created new challenges and opportunities for reading body language. Studies show that we process video interactions differently than face-to-face meetings, with certain cues amplified and others diminished. The skilled nonverbal reader must adapt to these new contexts, understanding how the medium affects the message. Practice deliberately in varied environments. Spend time observing interactions in different settings, professional meetings, casual gatherings, across cultures when possible. Note the subtle shifts in how people express the same emotions in different contexts. This deliberate practice builds your adaptive capacity, making you more flexible in your interpretations. Mastery of nonverbal communication isn't about achieving perfect understanding, but developing the capacity to learn and adapt continuously as new information emerges. Real-time feedback mechanisms. The gap between what we think we perceive and what actually exists forms the foundation of most misinterpretations in nonverbal communication. Closing this gap requires systematic feedback loops that test and refine our perceptions. Without verification, we risk building an elaborate but inaccurate understanding of others based purely on our biases and assumptions. Experienced interrogators and behavioral analysts use a technique called verbal verification to test their nonverbal reads. They might say, "You seem uncomfortable with this topic," and carefully observe the response. This serves two purposes. It creates an opportunity to correct misinterpretations immediately, and it demonstrates respectful attention that often encourages greater openness from others. The key is delivering such observations without accusation or judgment. Consider developing your own feedback system based on the 3 levels of confirmation. 1. Immediate verbal confirmation. Am I reading correctly that this concerns you? 2. Behavioral consistency. Do their subsequent actions align with your interpretation? 3. Third-party verification. When appropriate, check your observations with others who know the person well. Verification requires humility and courage in equal measure. Dr. Paul Ekman, renowned for his work on facial expressions, admits that even after decades of research, he regularly discovers new nuances and exceptions to patterns he once considered universal. His willingness to revise his understanding based on new evidence exemplifies the growth mindset essential for advancing nonverbal intelligence. Like learning to play a musical instrument, developing advanced observational skills requires deliberate practice with immediate feedback. When musicians play an incorrect note, they hear it instantly and can make adjustments. Create similar feedback loops for your nonverbal reads by practicing in low-stakes environments where you can check your interpretations without consequence. Family gatherings, casual social events, or even watching interviews with the sound off, then checking your interpretations when you turn the sound back on provide excellent practice grounds. Self-recording presents another powerful feedback mechanism. Record yourself during conversations or presentations, then review the footage with analytical distance. You'll likely notice nonverbal patterns you were completely unaware of. Habits of gesture, facial expressions, or postural shifts that communicate messages you never intended. This heightened self-awareness creates a foundation for better reading others. Understanding your own nonverbal tendencies makes you more attuned to similar patterns in others. Technology now offers sophisticated tools for nonverbal feedback. Eye tracking software can reveal exactly where your attention focuses during conversations. Facial analysis programs can identify micro-expressions you might miss. While these tools shouldn't replace human judgment, they can provide objective data to complement your subjective impressions and highlight blind spots in your observational patterns. Journal regularly about your nonverbal observations and their accuracy. Create a simple rating system to track your confidence in each interpretation and note when you receive confirmation or correction. Over time, patterns will emerge showing which types of cues you read accurately and which lead you astray. This personalized database becomes invaluable for refining your observational skills. How might your communication transform if you treated every interpretation as a hypothesis to be tested rather than a conclusion to be defended? Adaptation across social landscapes. Different social environments demand different observational strategies. The nonverbal cues relevant in a corporate boardroom differ significantly from those in a romantic relationship or cross-cultural negotiation. Mastery requires adapting your observational focus to match the context, relationship, and stakes of each unique situation. In high-pressure professional settings, stress responses often dominate the nonverbal landscape. Look for clusters of tension indicators: shallow breathing, rigid posture, limited gesturing, and compressed lips. Research by Dr. Amy Cuddy at Harvard shows that these stress responses significantly impact decision-making quality and interpersonal trust. By recognizing when stress is altering someone's communication patterns, you can adjust your approach accordingly, perhaps slowing the pace, changing topics, or suggesting a break. Intimate relationships require an entirely different observational framework. The familiarity between close partners creates unique baseline behaviors that would be meaningless to outsiders. A slight eyebrow raise that signals disagreement between spouses might go completely unnoticed in other contexts. Successful adaptation in close relationships means developing a personalized dictionary of cues specific to each important relationship in your life. Consider professional interrogators who must adapt their observational strategies based on both the subject and the situation. They don't apply a one-size-fits-all approach to reading deception. Instead, they establish individual baselines, noting how each person communicates when relaxed and truthful before looking for deviations that might signal deception. This individualized approach dramatically increases accuracy compared to looking for universal, lying signals. Social power dynamics significantly alter nonverbal communication. Those in positions of authority typically display expansive postures, maintain longer eye contact when speaking, and interrupt more frequently. Those with less power in a situation tend toward more constrained postures, higher speaking pitches, and more frequent nodding. By recognizing these power-related patterns, you gain insight into how organizational or social hierarchies might be influencing the communication dynamics you observe. Cross-cultural adaptation presents perhaps the greatest challenge and opportunity for nonverbal intelligence. Western cultures generally interpret direct eye contact as indicating honesty and engagement, while many Asian and indigenous cultures view it as confrontational or disrespectful. Similarly, interpersonal distance, touching behaviors, and even the meaning of a smile vary dramatically across cultural boundaries. The adaptive observer develops cultural frameworks that allow rapid shifting between different interpretive lenses based on the cultural context. The true master of nonverbal communication understands that there is no universal code to crack, but rather multiple, overlapping languages to learn. By continuously refining our observational skills, seeking honest feedback about our interpretations, and adapting our strategies across diverse social contexts, we develop a dynamic, nonverbal intelligence that serves us in every human interaction. This adaptive approach transforms nonverbal reading from a collection of static rules into a living practice that evolves with every conversation, allowing us to connect more authentically and navigate social complexities with greater confidence and accuracy. Calibrating your observational compass. To navigate the complex waters of nonverbal communication, you need more than static knowledge. You need a calibrated observational system that adjusts to changing conditions. This calibration process requires systematic attention to three key elements: contextual factors, baseline behaviors, and deviation patterns. Context provides the stage upon which all nonverbal communication performs. A person's body language in a job interview fundamentally differs from their expressions at a family dinner. Environmental factors like temperature, noise levels, and physical comfort significantly impact nonverbal expression. Research shows that even mild physical discomfort can produce behaviors easily misinterpreted as dishonesty or disinterest. Before making any interpretation, ask yourself, how might the context be influencing what I'm observing? baseline establishment forms the foundation of accurate reading. Rather than jumping to interpret isolated gestures, skilled observers first identify a person's typical communication patterns. Spend the first few minutes of any important interaction simply noticing the other person's natural rhythm, their typical speaking pace, gesture frequency, postural shifts, and facial animation. Only against this established baseline can meaningful deviations be accurately identified. The principle of clustering provides protection against over-interpretation of single cues. Look for constellations of related signals rather than isolated gestures. A single hand-to-hand movement means little, but when accompanied by increased blinking, voice pitch changes, and postural shifts away from you, it suggests a pattern worth noting. Research consistently shows that accuracy improves dramatically when observers require multiple, consistent cues before forming interpretations. Think of nonverbal reading like weather forecasting. The meteorologist doesn't rely on a single data point, but integrates multiple measurements: temperature, pressure system, wind patterns, historical trends, to form a prediction. Similarly, skilled people readers integrate multiple streams of nonverbal information, weighing each against contextual factors and the established baseline before forming conclusions. This systematic approach dramatically reduces the common pitfalls of nonverbal interpretation, including confirmation bias, seeing only what confirms our existing beliefs, and fundamental attribution error, attributing behaviors to personality rather than situation. By requiring multiple streams of evidence and contextual validation, you develop a more reliable observational system that serves you across diverse social situations. The feedback loop of mastery. Effective nonverbal reading isn't just about observation. It's about creating continuous improvement cycles that refine your skills over time. This improvement process requires deliberate practice with specific feedback mechanisms. Start by recording your impressions immediately after significant interactions. Note what you observed, what you concluded, and your confidence level in those conclusions. Later, as additional information becomes available through further interaction or third-party insights, revisit your notes to check accuracy. This simple practice dramatically accelerates learning by creating clear feedback loops. Seek trusted feedback partners who can provide honest input about your interpretations and your own nonverbal signals. These patterns serve as external mirrors, reflecting aspects of your communication that you cannot see yourself. The most valuable feedback partners are those who combine kindness with honesty, supportive enough to make feedback palatable, but direct enough to highlight genuine areas for improvement. Consider creating structured practice sessions using recorded interviews or interactions with consent when involving real people. First, watch with the sound off, noting your impressions of the emotional states and relationships displayed. Then review with sound to check your accuracy. This controlled practice environment allows you to isolate your nonverbal reading skills from other contextual factors. Remember that expertise develops through deliberate practice at the edge of your current ability. Challenge yourself with increasingly complex observational tasks. Move from controlled environments to more unpredictable ones. Progress from familiar cultures to unfamiliar ones. Advance from one-on-one interactions to group dynamics where multiple nonverbal conversations happen simultaneously. Professionals in fields requiring advanced nonverbal reading, from FBI agents to sales executives, maintain error logs, documenting misinterpretations and the lessons learned. This practice transforms mistakes from embarrassments into valuable learning opportunities. Consider adopting a similar approach. maintaining a personal catalog of misreads that serves as a custom-tailored improvement guide. The journey toward nonverbal mastery follows a spiral path rather than a straight line. You'll revisit familiar territory with a deeper understanding each time, integrating new insights with established knowledge to create an ever more refined observational system. Practical applications across context. The true test of nonverbal intelligence comes in its practical application across diverse situations. Each context presents unique challenges and opportunities for the skilled observer. In professional settings, nonverbal mastery creates significant advantages in negotiations, leadership, and team dynamics. Research shows that leaders who accurately read and respond to nonverbal cues create higher performing teams with greater psychological safety and creativity. Focus particularly on incongruence between verbal and nonverbal messages during meetings. These misalignments often signal areas of unaddressed concern or resistance that, when skillfully addressed, can prevent later problems. Personal relationships benefit enormously from refined observational skills. Partners who accurately read each other's nonverbal cues report higher relationship satisfaction and fewer misunderstandings. The key skill here involves distinguishing between habitual expressions and meaningful deviations. A partner's furrowed brow might be concentration rather than anger. Their silence might indicate processing rather than withdrawal. Verification through gentle, curious questions prevents the misinterpretations that often escalate into unnecessary conflict. Consider how nonverbal adaptation serves us in parenting. Children's nonverbal communication changes dramatically through developmental stages. Toddlers express nearly everything through body language and facial expression, while teenagers often deliberately mask their feelings behind carefully constructed facades. The adaptive parent adjusts their observational focus based on their child's developmental stage, looking beyond surface behaviors to the underlying emotional needs being expressed non-verbally. Sales and service professionals apply adaptive nonverbal reading to match their communication style with each client's preferences. Some customers respond best to an energetic, animated presentation, while others prefer calm, measured interaction. By reading these preferences through nonverbal feedback and adjusting accordingly, professionals create more comfortable and productive customer experiences. Cross-cultural situations demand the highest level of adaptive skill. When entering unfamiliar cultural environments, temporarily downgrade your confidence in your interpretations. What seems obviously negative or positive through your cultural lens can carry a completely different meaning in another context. Approach cross-cultural nonverbal communication with heightened curiosity and explicit verification. In my culture, this gesture might indicate X. Is that the same here? Healthcare providers who develop advanced nonverbal reading skills achieve better patient outcomes and satisfaction. Physical discomfort, anxiety about diagnosis, and reluctance to disclose sensitive information often appear first in nonverbal signals. The observant practitioner notices these cues and creates space to address unspoken concerns, significantly improving diagnostic accuracy and treatment compliance. Integration and practice. Developing advanced nonverbal intelligence requires regular, deliberate practice integrated into daily life. Consider establishing a personal development routine that systematically builds your adaptive capacity. Start each day with a brief mindfulness practice that centers your attention and clears perceptual filters. Research shows that even 5 minutes of mindful breathing significantly improves observational accuracy by reducing the cognitive load of internal dialogue. This creates mental space for a more accurate perception of external cues. Schedule weekly people-watching sessions in varied environments: coffee shops, professional gatherings, public transportation. During these sessions, practice baseline establishment and pattern recognition without the pressure of direct interaction. This builds your observational muscles in a low-stakes environment. Create monthly learning targets focused on specific aspects of nonverbal communication. One month might focus on facial microexpressions, another on postural changes, another on cultural variations. This systematic approach prevents overwhelm and builds expertise incrementally. Maintain a communication journal documenting key interactions, your observations, your interpretations, your subsequent verification or correction. Review this journal monthly to identify patterns in both your observational strengths and your interpretive biases. This self-reflection accelerates improvement by highlighting specific growth areas. Remember that expertise develops through both breadth and depth of experience. Seek opportunities to observe nonverbal communication across diverse populations, context, and relationships. Each new environment adds another dimension to your observational capacity. The integration of continuous learning, real-time feedback, and contextual adaptation creates a powerful framework for mastering nonverbal intelligence. By approaching each interaction with genuine curiosity, systematically testing our interpretations, and adapting our strategies across diverse social landscapes, we develop a dynamic observational capacity that serves us in every human connection. This adaptive approach transforms nonverbal reading from a collection of tricks into a sophisticated intelligence that enhances every relationship and interaction in our lives. Chapter 4: Aligning Signals, Enhancing Authenticity and Trust. The invisible deception we all commit daily. Trust is the currency of human connection, yet most of us unknowingly sabotage it every day. As we've explored throughout our journey of reading people, understanding nonverbal communication has revealed how our bodies speak volumes, often contradicting the very words coming from our mouths. This final chapter addresses perhaps the most powerful insight of all: the strategic alignment of our verbal and nonverbal signals to create authentic communication that builds unshakable trust. The disconnect between what we say and what our bodies express creates a cognitive dissonance in observers that triggers instinctive distrust. Think of the last time someone told you they were fine while their arms crossed defensively across their chest, or claimed to be excited about a proposal while leaning away from you. You didn't need special training to sense the inconsistency. Your brain registered it automatically. This misalignment is the primary reason why people struggle to connect authentically despite their best intentions. Throughout the previous chapters, we've developed your ability to detect subtle cues in others, micro-expressions, postural shifts, and vocal variations that reveal hidden emotions and intentions. Now we turn the lens inward to examine how you can harmonize your own communication channels. Congruence between verbal and nonverbal messaging isn't merely about appearing honest. It's about achieving genuine authenticity that resonates with others on both conscious and subconscious levels. The consequences of misalignment extend far beyond momentary awkwardness. In professional context, leaders whose words and actions contradict each other create organizational cultures of cynicism and disengagement. In personal relationships, such disconnects erode intimacy and foster emotional distance. The ability to align your communication signals represents perhaps the most potent application of the knowledge you've gained so far, transforming your awareness of nonverbal cues into a practical tool for building trust. What makes this skill particularly valuable is its versatility across context. Whether you're leading a team through organizational change, negotiating a high-stakes business deal, or building deeper connections in your personal life, the principles remain consistent. The human brain is wired to detect inconsistency, and when it perceives alignment between someone's words and nonverbal signals, it registers authenticity and responds with trust. This biological reality transcends cultural differences and applies universally. In the sections that follow, we'll first analyze the specific consequences of misalignment, examining how disconnects between verbal and nonverbal messages create barriers to effective communication. We'll then explore practical methods for achieving congruence, providing exercises to enhance your body awareness and intentionally align your communication channels. Finally, we'll focus on implementation strategies specifically tailored to professional environments, where trust serves as the foundation for influence and effectiveness. As we near the conclusion of our exploration into reading people, this chapter represents the culmination of all you've learned, turning your ability to detect subtle cues into the capacity to create authentic connections. The techniques we'll explore aren't manipulative tactics, but rather pathways to more honest, effective communication. By bringing conscious awareness to typically unconscious processes, you'll develop the rare ability to ensure your entire being communicates with integrity, substantially increasing your impact in every interaction. This alignment of signals represents the bridge between reading people accurately and connecting with them meaningfully, the difference between knowledge and wisdom in human communication. Let's begin the final stage of mastering the language of authenticity. The space between words. Thomas Morgan stood at the edge of the boardroom, watching the sunlight cut across the polished oak table. The morning air hung cool and sterile, purified by the building's ventilation systems. Outside, Chicago stretched like a concrete and steel canvas. He adjusted his tie and felt the sweat beneath his collar. The board members filtered in, each with their practiced smiles and firm handshakes. Thomas knew these people, or thought he did. 20 years at Westlake Investments had taught him to read the subtle language of shoulders and eyes, the things people said without words. Jenkins, the CFO, entered with his usual brisk nod, but Thomas caught the tension in his jaw. "Big day?" Jenkins said, slapping Thomas on the back. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Thomas nodded. "Just another quarterly report." But it wasn't. The acquisition had gone poorly. Numbers didn't lie, but people could dress them up. He had spent the night rehearsing how to deliver the news, practicing in front of his bathroom mirror until his wife had knocked on the door to ask if he was all right. "You need to be straight with them," she had said, her hand warm against his cheeks. "They'll see through anything else." The thought of her steadied him now as the room filled. Thomas observed Richardson, the chairman, enter last. The man moved with the confidence of someone who had never doubted himself, his hands open and gesturing as he spoke to the woman beside him. But Thomas noted how his eyes darted toward the presentation materials at the head of the table. "They trust you, Tom," Richardson had told him last week. The words hung between them now, unspoken but present. Thomas wondered if trust could survive bad news delivered badly. As the meeting began, Thomas stood. He felt the weight of 20 pairs of eyes. He had prepared slides, graphs, projections, all the armor of corporate communication. But as he reached for the remote, he stopped. He set it down and stepped away from the podium. "The Westland Mercer acquisition has not met expectations," he said, his voice steady, His hands hung open at his sides, palms slightly forward. He made eye contact with each board member, one at a time. We projected a 15% return in the first quarter. We've seen 7. A rustle moved through the room like wind through prairie grass. Thomas continued, moving around the table slowly. He kept his shoulders square, his stance open. When he spoke of challenges, he didn't cross his arms defensively as he might have done. When he outlined the path forward, he leaned in slightly, his body conveying the confidence his numbers couldn't yet support. Jenkins frowned, tapping his pen against his notepad. These figures suggest we should consider cutting our losses. Thomas felt the room shift toward Jenkins' perspective. He recognized the moment, trust hanging in the balance. He moved closer to Jenkins, not to intimidate, but to connect, and knelt slightly so they were at eye level. The figures only tell part of the story, Thomas said. His voice remained low, compelling the others to lean in. He held Jenkins' gaze, allowing his genuine concern and determination to show. I believe in this acquisition, not despite these numbers, but because of what they're teaching us about integration. The tension in the room changed. Thomas could feel it like a fisherman feels the current shift. Richardson uncrossed his arms. 2 board members who had been leaning away now leaned forward. The conversation that followed was direct, occasionally heated, but strangely unified. When they finally voted to continue supporting the acquisition, Thomas realized they hadn't been convinced by his words. They had trusted the man who spoke them. Later, as the room emptied, Richardson remained seated. That was different, he said, studying Thomas with new interest. Thomas shrugged. I decided to stop performing and start communicating. Richardson laughed. Sounds simple when you put it that way. He stood, gathering his papers. But we both know it isn't. He paused at the door. Whatever you did in there, that alignment between what you said and how you said it, that's rare. He tapped the doorframe thoughtfully. Makes me wonder why we don't teach that skill as much as we teach people to build spreadsheets. Thomas watched him go, then turned to the window. The afternoon sun had shifted, painting long shadows across the city. He thought about the meeting, about the moments when authenticity had trumped technique. In a world of practice presentations and polished phrases, how might people respond if they could trust not just the message, but the messenger? The hidden cost of mixed messages. When words tell one story, while body language reveals another, communication breaks down at its foundation. Misalignment between verbal and nonverbal communication creates cognitive dissonance in the receiver's mind. This disconnect forces the brain to process conflicting signals simultaneously, requiring extra mental effort to decipher the intended meaning. Research consistently shows that when faced with contradictory messages, people typically trust what they see over what they hear. This default to visual processing makes evolutionary sense. Our ancestors relied on visual cues to detect danger long before language developed. Picture 2 radio stations playing different songs through the same speaker. The resulting cacophony makes it impossible to enjoy either melody, leaving listeners frustrated and confused. This is precisely what happens in the human brain when processing misaligned communication signals. The neural pathways become overwhelmed trying to reconcile the contradiction. The result is not just confusion, but often suspicion and distrust. The consequences of such misalignment extend far beyond momentary confusion. When someone detects an inconsistency between your words and body language, their brain flags you as potentially deceptive or insincere. This happens largely at an unconscious level, triggering the ancient threat detection system that has kept humans safe for millennia. Once activated, this system is hard to override with rational thought. A single instance of misalignment can damage rapport that took months to build. as trust erodes much faster than it develops. In professional settings, these costs multiply exponentially. A leader whose words express confidence while their posture signals doubt will struggle to inspire their team. The sales professional who verbally guarantees quality while displaying nervous fidgeting will likely lose the sale. Studies in organizational psychology reveal that employees can detect inauthentic communication from management with remarkable accuracy, often responding with decreased engagement and productivity. The financial impact of this decreased trust can be substantial, affecting everything from employee retention to customer loyalty. When verbal and nonverbal messages contradict each other, the mind trusts the body signals, creating distrust that can permanently damage relationships and undermine professional credibility. Cultivating communication congruence. Achieving alignment between what you say and how your body expresses it begins with heightened self-awareness. Most misalignments occur unconsciously, stemming from internal conflicts between our authentic feelings and the message we're attempting to convey. The first step toward congruence involves regular body scans, a practice of mindfully checking in with physical sensations before and during important communications. Notice tension in your shoulders, changes in breathing patterns, or fidgeting hands. These physical signals often reveal underlying emotions that may contradict your verbal message. Think of your communication system as an orchestra where your words are just one section. Your facial expressions, posture, gestures, vocal tone, and even your breathing patterns all play equally important roles in creating harmony or dissonance. When the orchestra plays in unison, the message resonates clearly and powerfully with the audience. When the section plays out of sync, the resulting cacophony confuses and alienates listeners, regardless of how beautiful the melody might have been. Understanding your emotional state before communicating crucial messages provides the foundation for authenticity. If you're feeling anxious about delivering certain information, acknowledge this internally rather than attempting to suppress it. Suppression paradoxically amplifies nonverbal leakage, those subtle cues that reveal your true feelings despite verbal assertions to the contrary. Research in emotional regulation demonstrates that acceptance of uncomfortable feelings actually reduces their intensity and visibility in body language. Preparation plays a vital role in aligning your communication channels. For important conversations, practice not just what you'll say, but how you'll embody your message physically. Rehearse while standing in front of a mirror, or record yourself speaking to identify incongruencies. Pay particular attention to transition points between topics, as these moments often reveal underlying discomfort through sudden changes in posture, eye contact, or vocal patterns. Physical practices that strengthen the mind-body connection significantly improve communication congruence. Regular mindfulness meditation has been shown to increase interoceptive awareness, the ability to recognize internal physical states, which directly enhances control over nonverbal signals. Similarly, practices like yoga, tai chi, or even theatrical training develop greater body awareness and control, creating a stronger foundation for authentic expression. Feedback mechanisms serve as essential tools for improving signal alignment. Most of us have blind spots regarding our nonverbal behaviors that others can readily observe. Establish trusted relationships with colleagues or friends who will provide honest feedback about incongruencies they notice in your communication style. During important presentations or negotiations, arrange for someone to observe specifically for alignment between your verbal and nonverbal messages. Then debrief afterward to identify improvement opportunities. The language you choose significantly impacts your ability to maintain congruence. When your words accurately reflect your authentic thoughts and feelings, nonverbal alignment happens naturally. The practice of clean language, speaking directly without hyperbole, minimization, or distortion, reduces the cognitive load required to maintain consistency. Before critical communications, ask yourself, does this statement truly reflect what I believe and feel? If not, reconsider your message rather than attempting to force your body to comply with inauthentic words. How might your relationships and influence transform if every fiber of your being were consistently aligned with your words, creating an unbreakable foundation of trust with everyone you encounter? Strategic, nonverbal trust building. Professional environments magnify the impact of nonverbal communication on trust development. In leadership positions, followers constantly monitor leaders' nonverbal cues for signs of confidence, competence, and honesty. Sales environments similarly depend on trust signals that transcend verbal assurances. Research from Harvard Business School indicates that trustworthy nonverbal behaviors generate 34% more successful outcomes in negotiation scenarios compared to focusing solely on verbal content. Building trust through nonverbal communication begins with establishing baseline consistency. Regular patterns of behavior create predictability, which neurologically signals safety to others. Simple practices like maintaining appropriate eye contact during conversations, orientating your body toward the speaker, and displaying open posture communicate respect and attention. Consistency in these behaviors across different situations and with different people establishes a foundation of reliability that others unconsciously recognize and respond to positively. Nonverbal mirroring, subtly matching the posture, gestures, and energy level of your conversation partner, activates mirror neurons in the brain, creating neural synchrony between communicators. This synchrony generates feelings of similarity and understanding, key components of trust formation. However, mirroring must remain natural and subtle. Obvious mimicry produces the opposite effect, triggering suspicion rather than connection. Think of it as dancing with a partner. You adjust to their rhythm without copying their exact movements. The Align Framework. Achieving Nonverbal Congruence. The Align Framework provides a comprehensive approach to developing authentic, nonverbal communication that builds lasting trust in professional environments. This process model addresses both the internal and external factors that influence signal alignment, offering practical strategies for creating congruence between verbal content and physical expression. Awareness development. The foundation of the Align framework begins with cultivating deep awareness of your current nonverbal patterns. Most people operate on communication autopilot, unaware of the signals their bodies broadcast. Developing awareness involves regular self-assessment through video recording of presentations or important conversations, journaling about physical sensations during communication, and soliciting specific feedback from trusted observers. Awareness extends beyond recognizing your own patterns to understanding how they're interpreted by others. Different cultural contexts and professional environments may attach varying meanings to the same nonverbal cues. A direct gaze that communicates confidence in one setting might be perceived as aggression in another. This component of the framework emphasizes developing contextual intelligence, the ability to recognize how your nonverbal signals are likely to be received in specific environments. Limiting belief identification. This component addresses the internal barriers that create misalignment between verbal and nonverbal messages. Limiting beliefs about your authority, expertise, or right to express certain ideas often manifest as physical tension or incongruent gestures that undermine your verbal content. The framework provides reflection exercises to identify specific beliefs that trigger physical misalignment, such as imposter syndrome or conflict avoidance tendencies. Once identified, these limiting beliefs can be systematically addressed through cognitive restructuring techniques. This process involves challenging the validity of these beliefs and replacing them with evidence-based alternatives that support congruent expression. As internal conflicts resolve, nonverbal alignment naturally improves, reducing the cognitive load required to maintain consistency between verbal and physical communication. Integration practices. The integration component focuses on developing a consistent connection between thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, and external expression. Regular mindfulness practices train the ability to notice subtle internal states before they manifest externally. Specific exercises like body scanning during conversations help maintain awareness of tension patterns that may signal misalignment. Integration also involves practical rehearsal techniques that strengthen neural pathways between intended messages and appropriate nonverbal expressions. These include visualization exercises, role-playing important conversations, and practicing transitions between different emotional states while maintaining physical congruence. The goal is to develop an automatic alignment that requires minimal conscious effort during actual interactions. Gesture calibration. This component addresses specific nonverbal elements that significantly impact trust perception. Gestures serve as visual punctuation for verbal content, either reinforcing or undermining your message. The framework provides detailed guidance on calibrating gesture frequency, amplitude, and timing to match communication context and content. Research shows that appropriately timed gestures that illustrate verbal content enhance message retention by up to 33%, while random or contradictory movements significantly reduce credibility. Calibration extends to micro-expressions, brief facial movements that often reveal genuine emotional states before conscious control can mask them. Rather than attempting to suppress these telling signals, the framework teaches integration techniques that acknowledge authentic feelings while maintaining appropriate professional expression. This honesty paradoxically builds greater trust than perfect composure that feels inauthentic. Nonverbal feedback navigation. The final component focuses on establishing effective systems for ongoing improvement through feedback. Since we cannot see ourselves as others do, external input remains essential for refining nonverbal communication. The framework outlines methods for establishing communication partnerships, where colleagues provide specific, constructive feedback about nonverbal patterns that enhance or detract from your message effectiveness. This component also addresses how to respond productively when others react negatively to your nonverbal signals. Techniques for real-time adjustment without appearing flustered or insincere help maintain communication flow even when initial signals miss the mark. The ability to gracefully adapt nonverbal expression based on receiver feedback demonstrates both social intelligence and authentic concern for clear understanding, further reinforcing trust. The components of the Align framework interact dynamically rather than sequentially. Increased awareness naturally leads to identification of limiting beliefs, while integration practices simultaneously calibrate gestures and provide internal feedback. As skill develops in each area, the others similarly strengthen, creating a virtuous cycle of improving communication authentically. By understanding the consequences of mixed messages, practicing techniques for authentic alignment, and implementing the Align framework in professional context, you create a foundation of trust that enhances every interaction, transforming not only how others perceive you, but how effectively your true intentions and messages are received. Putting your skills into practice. Authenticity stands at the intersection of what we say and how we physically express ourselves. Throughout this exploration, we've seen how crucial alignment between verbal messages and nonverbal signals truly is. When these elements fall out of sync, trust erodes rapidly, often before we've even completed our thoughts. The consequences of misalignment extend far beyond momentary confusion. They can permanently damage relationships, undermine leadership authority, and dissolve sales opportunities that might have otherwise flourished. This congruence isn't merely desirable, it's essential for anyone seeking to communicate effectively in both personal and professional settings. The practices we've examined offer a pathway toward greater authenticity. By developing heightened body awareness, consciously aligning physical expressions with spoken words, and regularly reflecting on our communication patterns, we establish a foundation for trustworthy interactions. Remember that authenticity isn't performative. It stems from genuine self-awareness and intentional presence. Trust building through nonverbal means represents perhaps the most powerful application of these principles. In leadership context, maintaining consistent eye contact, adopting open postures, and mirroring appropriately can transform team dynamics. In sales environments, these same techniques help establish credibility that verbal persuasion alone cannot achieve. What truly matters is integration, the skills presented throughout this audiobook. From reading baseline behaviors to recognizing clusters of nonverbal cues, from detecting deception to aligning your own signals, work together as an interconnected system. The mastery of nonverbal communication isn't about isolated techniques, but about developing a comprehensive awareness that becomes second nature. As you move forward, practice will remain your greatest ally. Begin by focusing on alignments in low-pressure situations before applying these principles in more consequential interactions. Notice how others respond differently when your signals achieve harmony. Pay attention to those rare individuals whose authenticity seems effortless. They've internalized these very principles. The journey to reading people effectively ultimately circles back to reading yourself accurately first. By understanding your own nonverbal tendencies and bringing conscious awareness to your communication style, you develop both the sensitivity and the skill needed to interpret others with greater precision. The path toward mastery isn't about manipulation or control. Rather, it's about creating spaces where genuine connection can flourish, where both parties feel understood, respected, and valued. Authentic communication serves as the foundation for meaningful relationships in every domain of life. Take these insights with you into your next conversation. Notice the subtle shifts in energy when your words and body language align perfectly. Experience how others respond when they sense your authenticity. Most importantly, recognize how much richer your interactions become when you can both express and interpret human behavior with confidence and accuracy. The ability to read people effectively transforms not just how you communicate, but how you move through the world. It creates opportunities for deeper understanding, more meaningful connections, and more successful outcomes in every area of life. This isn't just about reading others. It's about writing a better story together. Conclusion. As we arrive at the end of our journey together, I hope you've gained not just knowledge, but wisdom, not just techniques, but understanding. Reading people is not merely a skill to be mastered. It's an ongoing practice that deepens our connection to the human experience. The chapters of this audiobook have taken you through a landscape of subtle gestures, micro-expressions, vocal variations, and behavioral patterns that collectively tell the story of who we are beneath our words. You've learned to recognize the truth in a fleeting expression, to hear sincerity or deception in a voice, and to sense the invisible currents of emotion that flow through every interaction. The most valuable insight I hope you've gained is that reading people isn't about manipulation or gaining advantage. It's about genuine understanding. When we truly see others, acknowledging their fears, desires, and unspoken needs, we create space for authentic connection in a world that often feels increasingly disconnected. Let's revisit the core principles we've explored together. First, we established that more than 90% of human communication is nonverbal, making body language literacy as essential as understanding spoken language. The signals we unconsciously transmit through facial expressions, posture, and gestures often reveal more truth than our carefully chosen words. We delved into micro-expressions, those lightning-fast emotional tells that flash across the face before conscious control can suppress them. You now know how to spot the momentary furrow of confusion, the genuine crinkle of joy around the eyes, or the flash of fear that contradicts confident words. You've learned that baseline behavior is your essential reference point. Understanding someone's normal patterns is crucial before interpreting deviations as significant. Context matters tremendously in human behavior interpretation. We explored how clusters of signals tell more reliable stories than isolated gestures. A single crossed arm might mean nothing, but when combined with leaning away, minimal eye contact, and tight lips, a picture of discomfort or disagreement emerges. Perhaps most importantly, we discussed how to remain mindful of your own biases that can color interpretation and lead to misreading others. True skill in reading people includes the humility to question your initial judgments. As you move forward, I encourage you to practice these skills with patience and ethical consideration. Like any worthwhile ability, reading people with accuracy takes time to develop. Start in low-stakes environments. Observe strangers in public spaces. Analyze characters in films with the sound off. Or practice with trusted friends who can give you feedback. Remember that this knowledge comes with responsibility. Use these insights to create understanding, not to manipulate. Apply them to improve communication, resolve conflicts, and deepen connections rather than to gain an advantage over others. While this audiobook provides a comprehensive foundation, human behavior remains wonderfully, frustratingly complex. Cultural differences, individual neurodiversity, and unique personal histories mean there will always be exceptions to patterns. Approach each person with fresh eyes and an open mind rather than rigid formulas. I encourage you to continue your education in this fascinating field. The science of nonverbal communication continues to evolve, with new research emerging regularly. Stay curious, observe thoughtfully, and maintain a learner's mindset. The skills you've gained here will serve you in countless ways. From navigating important negotiations to recognizing when a loved one needs support before they ask. You'll find yourself more attuned to the subtle currents of emotion in meetings, family gatherings, and casual encounters alike. Start small. Tomorrow, make it a point to really observe one person you interact with regularly. Notice their baseline behaviors, their patterns of expression, their comfort signals, and stress responses. Don't analyze out loud or make them uncomfortable. Simply notice. Over time, this watchfulness will become second nature. In closing, remember that the ultimate goal of reading people isn't just about accuracy, it's connection. When we truly see others, acknowledging their full humanity with all its complexity, we create the foundation for meaningful relationships built on understanding and empathy. In a world of increasingly technological connection but emotional distance, this ability may be one of the most valuable skills you can cultivate. The most powerful connections are formed when we stop merely looking at each other and begin truly seeing each other. In that moment of recognition, when we acknowledge the unspoken truth behind the words, we discover what it means to be human together. Maya Angelou.
We appreciate you tuning in to one of our captivating audiobooks. For more immersive experiences, here is another audiobook we're certain you'll enjoy. Don't forget to show your support by liking this video, sharing what you loved about this audiobook in the comments section below, and subscribing for more captivating audiobooks like this. Thanks for being a part of our audiobook community.